Welcome to Radiant Wisdom, where quiet moments give rise to profound insights and simple reflections lead to extraordinary clarity. Thank you for being here with us today. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, the fear of vulnerability, or the weight of mistrust, know that you are not alone. Trust is something we all wrestle with at some point in our lives. It shapes how we love, how we connect, and how we navigate the challenges life places in our path. But let's be honest, trust isn't always easy. Sometimes it feels like the most delicate thing in the world. One misstep, one harsh word, and the bridges we carefully built between ourselves and others can seem to crumble in an instant. Whether it's in relationships, friendships, or even our trust in the broader world, we've all experienced moments that make us question if trust is worth the risk. And perhaps the hardest question of all, how do we build trust when it's been broken? In this fast-pacing world, it can feel safer to close ourselves off, to keep our hearts guarded against disappointment. We tell ourselves that if we don't expect too much, we won't be let down. But is that truly living? Without trust, we miss out on the very essence of human connection. Trust, at its core, is a gift, a courageous choice to believe in something beyond our control. Think of the most meaningful relationships in your life, the moments when you felt seen, understood, and supported. Those moments didn't happen in isolation. They happened because you allowed yourself to trust. Trusting someone isn't about pretending everything will be perfect. It's about accepting the uncertainty and finding beauty in the vulnerability that follows. But what about when trust is broken? How do we move forward after disappointment? This is where the journey becomes deeply personal. For some, the answer lies in self-protection. For others, it's about forgiveness and rebuilding. And for many of us, the answer shifts as we grow. Today's reflection is about exploring those choices, what it means to place trust in others, in life, and perhaps most importantly, in ourselves. As we begin, I invite you to pause for a moment. Take a deep breath, close your eyes if you can, and ask yourself, where does trust feel strongest in my life right now? And where does it feel fragile? Is it in your relationships, with family, friends, or partners? Is it with your career or the future you're building? Or perhaps, is it within yourself, trusting your own decisions, strength, and resilience? Wherever you are on this journey, this space is for you to reflect, to heal, and to find clarity. Together, we'll unpack the layers of trust, uncovering what strengthens it, what weakens it, and how we can nurture it, not only in our external lives, but within our hearts. If you find today's reflection meaningful, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need this message, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your engagement helps this space of kindness and wisdom grow, and you never know whose heart you might touch by sharing. So, settle in and give yourself the gift of stillness. In the next few moments, we'll explore the profound power of trust, not as something fragile, but as a source of strength, resilience, and connection. Let's begin. Trusting others, a reflection on connection. Let's begin by looking at one of the simplest but most profound truths. Life is built on connection. From the moment we enter this world, we rely on the care and presence of others. But as we grow older and experience disappointment or betrayal, we start to view trust as something fragile, something that must be earned with difficulty and withdrawn at the first sign of trouble. We begin to ask ourselves, how do I know if this person is trustworthy? What if they hurt me? What if they let me down? And when we've been hurt before, that question can feel like an insurmountable wall. But here's an important perspective to consider. Trust doesn't mean ignoring someone's imperfections. It doesn't mean assuming they'll never make a mistake. Instead, trusting others is about acknowledging that they are human, flawed and ever-changing just like you, and choosing to believe in their potential for good. Think of someone you've trusted in your life, a mentor, a close friend, or a family member. What made that connection so meaningful? Was it their unwavering support during a difficult time? Their ability to listen without judgment? Perhaps it was the simple comfort of knowing they saw you as you are and accepted you without conditions. Those moments of trust are sacred because they remind us that we don't have to walk through life alone. When we trust someone, we aren't just opening ourselves up to support, we're giving them a quiet but powerful message. I see you, I value you, I believe in you, and in doing so we create a space where they too can grow stronger in their own sense of worth. But what happens when trust is broken? What do we do when the very people we've leaned on disappoint us? This is where many of us struggle. It's natural to close ourselves off, to build emotional walls so high that no one can ever hurt us again. But ask yourself, is this truly protection or is it isolation? True connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability always carries a risk. But without it, we rob ourselves of the depth and beauty that connection brings. Yes, people will make mistakes. Yes, sometimes they will let us down. But that doesn't mean they're incapable of redemption. Often our greatest pain comes not from the betrayal itself, but from our expectations that people will always act according to our hopes and ideals. It's important to remember that trust isn't about controlling someone else's actions. It's about making peace with the uncertainty of life. Can we learn to hold space for the humanity in others, even when they fall short? Can we see their struggles and recognize that sometimes their actions come not from a place of malice, but from their own fears and limitations? Of course, this doesn't mean we ignore red flags or excuse harmful behavior. Trust must be balanced with wisdom. Healthy boundaries are essential to maintaining our well-being. Trusting someone doesn't mean turning a blind eye to their flaws. It means choosing to walk alongside them with open eyes and an open heart. And sometimes it means knowing when to walk away for the sake of your peace. But consider this: how many times have you stumbled in your own life? How many times have you made a decision you regretted, said something you didn't mean, or failed to show up as your best self? And yet, somewhere along the way, someone chose to trust you again. Maybe it was a parent, a friend, or even a stranger who saw your potential when you couldn't see it yourself. Those moments matter. They teach us that trust isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about being willing to see beyond the immediate hurt and understand the deeper story of another person's heart. There's an old parable about a tree in the forest. It was weathered and scarred by storms, its branches bent, but not broken. The surrounding trees whispered, "Why do you continue to grow? Aren't you tired of being battered by the winds?" And the tree simply replied, "Because my roots are strong and I trust that after every storm, the sun will return." In the same way, when we build trust with others, we plant seeds of resilience, not only in them, but also within ourselves. Trust strengthens our ability to forgive, to empathize, and to keep moving forward. Even if someone stumbles, our faith in them can help them rise again. This doesn't mean we'll never feel disappointed, but if we approach trust with compassion, we'll realize that we're not just giving something away, we're cultivating something powerful. We're reminding others that they are worthy of connection, even in their imperfect moments. And we're reminding ourselves that trusting others is a reflection of our own strength and openness, not a weakness. So the next time you feel hesitant to trust, pause and ask yourself, is my fear based on what's happening now or on wounds from the past? Am I protecting my peace, or am I closing myself off from growth? Remember, trust is a gift, both to the one receiving it and the one offering it. It's an invitation to believe in the good that still exists, even when the world feels uncertain. Because at the end of the day, connection is what gives life meaning. And trust is the bridge that allows us to meet one another, not in perfection, but in grace. The fragility of trust, self-doubt, and pride. Trust is a fragile thing. It can take years to build and only moments to break. But what makes it so fragile? Often we believe the culprit is external. Someone else's betrayal, dishonesty, or failure. However, when we look deeper, we may find that two silent forces within ourselves play a bigger role than we realize: self-doubt and pride. Let's start with self-doubt. It's that quiet, persistent voice inside us that whispers, "What if you're not enough? What if they're only pretending to care? What if you'll get hurt again?" This voice often stems from past wounds, moments when our trust was broken and left scars we've never fully healed. These scars become filters, making us question the intentions of even the most well-meaning people. Self-doubt convinces us that vulnerability is dangerous. It tells us that the safest path is to withhold our trust because deep down, we're afraid of what we might lose. But here's the truth. When we hold back out of fear, we don't just protect ourselves from pain, we also shut ourselves off from joy, love, and growth. Think about a time when someone truly believed in you, perhaps when you didn't even believe in yourself. Maybe it was a teacher who saw your potential, a friend who stood by you during a difficult time, or a mentor who trusted you with an opportunity. Their trust might have felt like a lifeline, pulling you out of the storm of your own self-doubt. Imagine how different your life might have been if they had withheld that trust out of their own fear. Now consider this. When you withhold trust from others, you may be depriving them of that same lifeline. When you allow self-doubt to dictate your choices, you risk creating distance where there could be connection. But there's another force that complicates our ability to trust: pride. Unlike self-doubt, which makes us feel small, pride builds a fortress around our hearts. It's the voice that says, "You don't need anyone, you're better off alone." Pride tells us that admitting vulnerability is a sign of weakness, and that once someone disappoints us, they don't deserve another chance. It convinces us that cutting people off is a form of strength. But is it? Or is it just a way to protect our ego from the pain of feeling betrayed or insignificant? Pride can make forgiveness feel impossible. It can turn small mistakes into irreversible failures in our minds. But when we hold on to that sense of superiority, when we cling to the idea that we're above being hurt or let down, we may actually be building walls so high that no one can reach us, even those who genuinely care. There's a story from the Buddhist tradition about a monk and a large jar of water. The monk was asked to carry the jar for many miles, but as he walked, the water inside began to ripple and spill. The more he tried to hold the jar tightly and control the water, the more it sloshed out. Finally, the monk realized that if he loosened his grip, allowing the water to settle naturally, it would calm and remain steady. As he took care that the jar settled naturally, it would calm and remain steady. The jar became easier to carry. Trust is a lot like that. When we try to control everything, when we grip relationships tightly out of fear or pride, we make it harder for trust to flow freely. Instead of nurturing connection, we create tension. We lose the ease and peace that comes from allowing things to unfold as they will. But what does it mean to loosen our grip? It means acknowledging that trust isn't something we can guarantee or force. It's something we cultivate with patience and intention. It also means recognizing when our expectations are fueling disappointment. Ask yourself, is my lack of trust in someone really about their actions, or is it about my fear of being hurt? Am I withholding forgiveness because I believe they're unworthy of trust, or because my pride tells me it's too humiliating to try again? This doesn't mean we should ignore our intuition or dismiss the red flags that warn us of genuine danger. Trust requires discernment. But discernment isn't the same as pride or suspicion. It's a form of wisdom that allows us to assess situations without bitterness or fear. One of the most difficult yet liberating realizations is that our trust in others often reflects our trust in ourselves. When we doubt our own worth or judgment, it becomes harder to trust anyone else. Conversely, when we cultivate self-compassion and confidence, we become more capable of extending that trust outward. Of course, this doesn't mean we'll never get hurt again. Vulnerability carries risks, but it also carries the potential for healing, connection, and growth. When we trust wisely and open-heartedly, we aren't guaranteeing an outcome, we're choosing courage over fear. Think of trust as a bridge. Self-doubt erodes its foundations, while pride builds barriers that prevent anyone from crossing. But with self-awareness and compassion, we can rebuild that bridge stronger than before. So the next time you're tempted to close yourself off, take a moment to breathe. Ask yourself, am I protecting myself from real harm, or am I protecting my pride? Am I mistrusting this person because of their actions, or because I've forgotten my own resilience? In these quiet reflections, you may discover that trust isn't about perfection. It's about grace. It's about accepting the possibility of pain without letting it define you. It's about choosing connection again and again, not because it's easy, but because it's what makes life meaningful. And remember, even if someone breaks your trust, you don't have to lose faith in yourself. You are still whole. You still have the power to choose trust, not as a weakness, but as an act of profound strength. The illusion of control, why we fear trust. Why is it so hard to trust? If we look closely, much of our hesitation stems from a deep-rooted need for control. We want to believe that if we can predict outcomes, avoid risks, and protect ourselves from uncertainty, we can avoid disappointment and pain. In this way, mistrust becomes a shield, a way to maintain the illusion that we're in control. But here's the truth. Control, in the way we imagine it, is an illusion. Life, by its very nature, is unpredictable. People change, circumstances shift, the unexpected happens. Yet instead of accepting this reality, we often resist it. We build routines, set expectations, and cling to plans in an effort to feel secure. But when something disrupts that fragile structure, like a broken promise or an unexpected betrayal, we're reminded of how little control we actually have. This realization can feel unsettling, even terrifying. To cope, we may try to tighten our grip even further. We set higher standards, become hyper-vigilant, and tell ourselves that if we're just careful enough, no one will ever hurt us again. But this mindset is exhausting. It keeps us trapped in a constant state of tension, always waiting for the next disappointment, always scanning for the next threat. Why do we fear trust so much? Because trusting someone, or even trusting life, requires us to let go of control. When we trust, we're stepping into the unknown. We're saying, I can't guarantee the outcome, but I choose to believe anyway. And for many of us, that feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. But here's something to consider. What if trust isn't about surrendering to chaos, but about embracing life's natural flow? What if releasing our need for control doesn't weaken us, but frees us? Think of a river. When we try to control its current, we only exhaust ourselves. We build dams, reroute its flow, and resist its movement, but the river keeps moving forward regardless of our efforts. Yet when we learn to flow with the river, we discover a sense of ease. We're no longer fighting against what is, we're moving with it. Trust works in much the same way. It invites us to shift from resistance to acceptance. When we release our need to control every aspect of our lives, we create space for peace. We begin to see that uncertainty isn't always a threat. It can also be an opportunity for growth, connection, and self-discovery. But letting go of control doesn't mean becoming passive or naive. It doesn't mean ignoring red flags or putting ourselves in harm's way. Instead, it's about recognizing the limits of what we can and cannot control. We can't control someone else's loyalty or honesty, but we can control how we respond. We can't predict every twist and turn life will take, but we can choose how we show up in the face of change. When we fear trust, we're often trying to avoid pain. But pain, like joy, is a natural part of the human experience. The more we try to shield ourselves from it, the more we isolate ourselves from life itself. Instead of closing ourselves off, what if we learn to sit with discomfort, knowing it's temporary? What if we reminded ourselves that we've survived difficulty before, and that we have the strength to do so again? There's a beautiful teaching in Buddhist philosophy about impermanence. It reminds us that nothing in life is fixed, neither our joys nor our sorrows. Everything changes just as the seasons shift from summer to fall, winter to spring. When we resist this truth, we suffer, but when we embrace it, we find peace. Trusting life means trusting this natural rhythm, even when we don't fully understand it. Consider this. Have you ever experienced something you thought was a setback, only to realize later that it was a blessing in disguise? Perhaps a lost opportunity led you to something better. Perhaps a painful ending paved the way for a new beginning. These moments remind us that we don't always see the full picture in the moment, but that doesn't mean life isn't working in our favor. The same is true in our relationships with others. Trusting someone doesn't mean they'll never hurt us. It means we're willing to see them as complex, imperfect beings, just like we are. It means accepting that they might fail us, but also choosing to believe in their potential to grow, learn, and do better. Of course, there will be times when trust is broken in ways that can't be repaired. And in those moments, walking away may be the wisest choice. But even then, we can choose to let go without becoming bitter or cynical. We can choose to release control, not as a form of defeat, but as an act of grace, an acknowledgement that life is bigger than any single hurt or disappointment. So, the next time you find yourself clinging to the need for control, take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I trying to avoid discomfort, or am I making room for growth? Am I protecting my peace, or am I building a wall that isolates me? Trust isn't about guaranteeing safety. It's about embracing life with an open heart, even when the path is uncertain. When we let go of the illusion of control, we don't lose our power, we reclaim it. We remember that resilience doesn't come from avoiding difficulty. It comes from knowing we can face whatever comes our way. And in that space of acceptance, we may find something unexpected: peace, freedom, and the quiet but profound strength that comes from trusting life, others, and ourselves. Trusting life beyond betrayal and loss. One of the hardest things to do in life is to trust again after we've been betrayed or after we've experienced loss. Whether it's the betrayal of a friend, the end of a relationship, the loss of a loved one, or even the shattering of a dream, we all know the pain of feeling like life has pulled the ground out from under our feet. In those moments, it's easy to believe that life itself is untrustworthy, that it's random, harsh, and indifferent to our suffering. But what if there's another way to see things? What if, instead of focusing on what we've lost, we learn to see life through a lens of resilience, grace, and possibility? Let's start with a truth that's both difficult and freeing. Life doesn't always go according to our plans, and while that can feel like betrayal, it's really just the nature of life itself. We create expectations, build routines, and set goals, believing that if we work hard enough, things will unfold exactly as we imagine. And sometimes they do, but often they don't. When life takes an unexpected turn, our first instinct may be to resist. We replay the events in our minds, trying to understand why things went wrong. We search for someone to blame, sometimes others, sometimes ourselves. And in that space of grief and disappointment, it can feel like life itself has betrayed us. But consider this: What if life isn't something that's happening to us, but something that's happening for us? What if, instead of betrayal, these moments are invitations, calling us to grow in ways we wouldn't have chosen on our own? Take a moment to reflect on your past. Think of a time when something didn't go the way you hoped. A relationship ended, a job opportunity slipped away, or you faced a setback you didn't think you could recover from. At the time, it may have felt like the end of something important. And yet, here you are. Somehow, you made it through. And maybe, just maybe, that loss became the very thing that led you to a better path. This isn't to dismiss the pain of loss. Loss is real and it's important to honor it. But if we stay locked in grief and resentment, we miss out on the possibility of healing. Trusting life after betrayal and loss doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It means believing that even when things fall apart, there's still a path forward. Think of the forest after a wildfire. To the untrained eye, it looks like destruction. Trees reduced to ash, the ground scorched and barren. But if you return months later, you'll see new growth emerging from the earth. Seeds that could only be activated by fire begin to sprout, bringing fresh life to the forest. The fire wasn't the end, it was a beginning. Life works the same way. Sometimes, the very things that break us open are the things that make us stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Trusting life means remembering that while loss is inevitable, so is renewal. Seasons change, storms pass, and what feels like an ending may actually be the beginning of something new. But what about betrayal? How do we trust life when people hurt us, sometimes intentionally? How do we move forward when someone we believed in lets us down? The key is to separate people's actions from life itself. People are fallible. They act out of fear, ignorance, or pain. Their choices may hurt us, but those choices don't define the nature of life itself. Life doesn't betray us, people do. And while we can't control how others behave, we can control how we choose to respond. When someone breaks our trust, we can either close ourselves off, letting that betrayal harden our hearts, or we can choose to learn, heal, and remain open. Trusting life doesn't mean we have to naively trust everyone we meet. Instead, it means trusting that even in the face of betrayal, we can rebuild. We can discern who deserves our trust and who doesn't, while still believing in the goodness that exists in the world. This brings us to an important point. Trusting life isn't about blind optimism. It's about resilience. It's about knowing that life will include both joy and sorrow, gains and losses, love and pain. When we trust life, we acknowledge that we can't avoid suffering, but we also trust that suffering isn't the end of the story. There's a Zen saying that goes, "Let go or be dragged." When we resist what life presents, we're like someone holding on to a rope that's pulling them in the wrong direction. The tighter we hold on, the more pain we feel. But when we let go, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. Trusting life means letting go of the need for certainty and control. It means opening ourselves to the unknown with courage and curiosity. It means understanding that while we may not always get what we want, we always have the opportunity to grow. If you've ever seen a bird perched on a fragile branch, you'll notice something remarkable. The bird doesn't trust the branch to hold, it trusts its own wings. And so should we. Trust isn't about expecting life to be steady and predictable. It's about knowing that no matter what breaks beneath us, we have the strength to rise again. So if you're in a season of loss or betrayal, take heart. This moment is not your final chapter. Trust that life, in its infinite complexity, is still unfolding something meaningful for you. Trust that even the hardest days can lead to moments of clarity and joy. And most of all, trust yourself. Because just like the forest after the fire, you too are capable of new growth. Trusting ourselves, the key to rebuilding faith. Of all the kinds of trust we experience, the most essential, and often the most difficult, is the trust we place in ourselves. When trust in others or life has been shaken, the foundation we return to is our own inner strength. But what happens when even that feels fragile? What do we do when we lose faith in our own judgment, resilience, or worth? Let's be honest, trusting ourselves is not always easy. Life is full of moments where we make mistakes, misjudge situations, or fall short of our own expectations. In those moments, it's easy to become our harshest critic. We replay decisions, dissecting everything we could have done differently. We carry the weight of regret and shame, convinced that our failures define us. But here's a simple truth: no one navigates life perfectly. Self-trust isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about knowing that we have the strength to recover from them. It's the quiet assurance that no matter how many times we stumble, we are capable of standing back up, learning, and moving forward with grace. To rebuild trust in ourselves, we need to change the way we speak to ourselves. So often, our inner dialogue is laced with harshness. How could you have done that? You should have known better. You're not strong enough. But imagine speaking to a dear friend that way. Would you ever berate someone you loved for making a mistake? Would you judge them as harshly as you judge yourself? The first step in regaining self-trust is cultivating self-compassion. When you falter, remind yourself, I'm human, I'm still learning. This mistake doesn't define me, it shapes me. Instead of treating failures as evidence of your shortcomings, treat them as stepping stones on your path of growth. Self-trust grows stronger every time you choose to offer yourself kindness instead of condemnation. But beyond self-compassion, rebuilding self-trust also requires action. Trust isn't just a feeling, it's a practice. Each time you make a promise to yourself and follow through, you strengthen your belief in your own reliability. These don't have to be grand gestures. Small, consistent steps matter. Did you promise yourself you'd take a walk to clear your mind? Follow through, even if it's only for 10 minutes. Did you tell yourself you'd set boundaries in an overwhelming situation? Honor that commitment, even if it's uncomfortable. When we keep our word to ourselves, no matter how small, we remind ourselves that we are dependable, capable, and worthy of our own trust. Of course, part of trusting ourselves is also learning to forgive ourselves when we fall short of our intentions. There will be days when you miss the mark, when old patterns resurface, or when fear gets the best of you. But self-trust isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. It's the belief that setbacks don't mean failure, they mean you're still on the journey. Another way to cultivate self-trust is to reconnect with your intuition, that quiet, guiding voice within you. In today's world, we're bombarded by external opinions, advice, and expectations. It's easy to lose touch with our own instincts. But deep down, you know more than you give yourself credit for. Think back to times when you felt a quiet knowing, a sense that you were on the right path, even if it didn't make sense to others. Maybe it was a career change, a move, or a decision to walk away from something no longer serving you. Those moments of intuition are proof that you can trust yourself. The challenge is learning to listen amid the noise. To rebuild that connection, try creating moments of stillness. Whether through meditation, journaling, or simply taking a quiet walk, give yourself space to hear your inner voice. Trusting yourself doesn't require having all the answers. It requires being still enough to hear the wisdom you already carry. But perhaps the hardest part of self-trust is learning to trust ourselves after we've hurt others or ourselves. When we've made choices that led to pain, it's easy to fall into a spiral of guilt and self-loathing. In those moments, the path to rebuilding self-trust lies in accountability and growth. Own your mistakes without defining yourself by them. Apologize where needed, not just to others, but to yourself. Then ask, what can I learn from this? How can I show up differently next time? Self-trust isn't built through avoidance, it's built through courageous self-reflection and the commitment to do better. There's a powerful Buddhist teaching that reminds us, no mud, no lotus. The lotus, a symbol of enlightenment and beauty, grows in muddy waters. In the same way, our greatest strength often grows from the murky, painful moments of our lives, the times when you've doubted yourself, made mistakes, or felt lost. Those are the very moments that, with reflection and resilience, can bloom into self-trust and self-awareness. When you begin to trust yourself again, something remarkable happens. You become less dependent on external validation. You stop seeking constant reassurance from others. Instead, you carry an inner confidence, a quiet knowing that no matter what life throws your way, you have the ability to navigate it. This doesn't mean you won't feel fear, uncertainty, or doubt. Those feelings are part of the human experience. But self-trust gives you the strength to face them without being paralyzed by them. It's the voice that says, I may not have all the answers, but I trust myself to figure things out. So, if you're in a season of self-doubt, remember, you have already overcome so much to be here today. You've navigated storms that once felt impossible. You've picked yourself up after falls that could have kept you down. Trust that your past resilience will carry you forward again. The path to self-trust is not linear, and it doesn't happen overnight. But with each step, each small act of self-compassion, each promise kept, each moment of stillness, you rebuild that foundation of faith within yourself. Because at the end of the day, trusting yourself isn't just about confidence, it's about courage. The courage to show up, to grow, and to believe that you are worthy of your own trust. The balance of trust, wisdom, and boundaries. Trusting others can feel like walking a tightrope. On one side lies vulnerability, where openness allows for connection and growth. On the other side lies caution, where wisdom and self-preservation remind us to protect our well-being. The key to navigating this delicate balance is finding the intersection between trust, wisdom, and healthy boundaries. Trusting without discernment can lead to heartache, while withholding trust entirely can isolate us. So how do we find a middle path, one that allows us to remain open without losing ourselves in the process? It begins with understanding that trust is not an all or no thinking decision. It's a spectrum, one that requires thoughtful reflection, self-awareness, and a commitment to our own peace. Let's start with the role of wisdom. Wisdom in trust means knowing that while trust is a beautiful gift, it should not be handed out carelessly. Life has likely taught you valuable lessons about who deserves your trust and who does not. Trusting wisely means taking those lessons to heart, not in a way that makes you bitter or cynical, but in a way that makes you discerning. Consider this. Wisdom doesn't ask us to shut people out. It asks us to pay attention. Sometimes we ignore the signs in front of us because we desperately want to believe someone is trustworthy. But wisdom reminds us that trust isn't something that should be based solely on words or intentions. It's something earned through consistent actions over time. When someone shows us their true character, it's important that we listen, even if it's not what we hope to see. However, wisdom also asks us to be careful with our assumptions. Just as some people may betray our trust, others may surprise us with their sincerity. If we build emotional walls too high, we may block out not only harm, but also kindness and support. Wisdom encourages us to stay observant, flexible, and curious, rather than rigid and closed off. Now, let's talk about boundaries. Boundaries are essential to healthy trust because they provide structure, clarity, and protection. Without boundaries, trust can feel overwhelming, like leaving all the doors and windows of our emotional home wide open to whatever comes our way. Boundaries are the way we decide how much access others have to our time, energy, and heart. They help us trust without losing ourselves. Think of boundaries as the foundation of a strong bridge. If a bridge is built without strong supports, it will collapse under pressure. In the same way, trust without clear boundaries can lead to resentment, burnout, or emotional pain. But when we set boundaries, we create a framework that allows trust to flourish in a way that feels safe and sustainable. For example, trusting someone doesn't mean you have to share every aspect of your life with them right away. You can start small, by trusting them with a conversation, an opinion, or a vulnerable moment, and observe how they handle it. Healthy boundaries remind us that trust doesn't have to be immediate or total. It can grow gradually. Another important point about boundaries is that they're not about controlling others. They're about protecting our peace. When we set a boundary, we're not punishing someone or pushing them away. We're simply saying, "This is what I need to feel safe and respected." If someone respects that boundary, it's a sign that they value the relationship. If they don't, it may be a sign that they're not capable of offering the trustworthiness you deserve. It's also crucial to remember that boundaries aren't just external, they're internal too. Sometimes the person we need to set boundaries with is ourselves. How often do we overextend, people please, or ignore our own needs in the name of trust? Self-trust means honoring your inner voice when it tells you that you need rest, space, or time to reflect. It means trusting that your worth doesn't come from being everything to everyone. It comes from being true to yourself. So, how do we know when our trust is balanced? When we're neither too guarded nor too exposed? A helpful indicator is how we feel. Trust that's balanced with wisdom and boundaries feels steady, not shaky. It feels calm, not chaotic. When we're trusting wisely, we feel secure in our decisions, even if they're difficult. When we're trusting recklessly or holding on to mistrust, we often feel unsettled, anxious, or drained. If you find yourself second-guessing whether someone deserves your trust, take a step back and ask yourself, is my hesitation coming from fear, or is it coming from wisdom? Am I afraid of being hurt again, or am I noticing genuine red flags? Learning to differentiate between fear and intuition is a practice, but the more you listen to yourself, the clearer the answer becomes. Finally, remember that healthy trust doesn't require you to sacrifice your boundaries or self-respect. Trust built on mutual respect creates space for both parties to feel safe, valued, and free to be themselves. It's not about one person giving everything while the other takes. It's about reciprocity, balance, and care. The beauty of finding the balance between trust and boundaries is that it empowers you. Instead of feeling powerless in your relationships, you begin to understand that you have a choice in who you allow into your life and to what extent. You can love openly while still protecting your heart. You can be generous with your time and energy without overextending yourself. As you reflect on this, remember that boundaries don't make you selfish, they make you strong. And wisdom doesn't make you untrusting, it makes you discerning. Finding the balance between trust, wisdom, and boundaries is an act of self-love and self-respect. So, the next time you're faced with the decision to trust, ask yourself, am I trusting with clarity and intention? Are my boundaries clear and kind? Am I showing up for myself as much as I'm showing up for others? When you approach trust this way, it becomes not just a gift you give to others, but a way to honor your own worth and protect your inner peace. And in that space of wisdom and balance, trust becomes not a risk, but a strength. Conclusion, the takeaway. As we come to the end of this reflection on trust, let's take a moment to gather everything we've explored. Trust is not a simple, one-dimensional concept. It's a living, breathing force that weaves through every part of our lives. Trust connects us to others, to life itself, and to our deepest selves. But trust can also be fragile, shaped by our fears, wounds, and hopes. We've reflected on the importance of trusting others, not blindly, but with wisdom, openness, and a readiness to embrace vulnerability. We've recognized the role that self-doubt and pride play in eroding our ability to trust and how they can lead us to build emotional walls instead of bridges. We've explored the discomfort of letting go of control and trusting life's natural flow, especially in times of betrayal and loss. And we've acknowledged that trusting ourselves, the foundation of all trust, is a practice rooted in self-compassion, resilience, and small intentional steps. So what is the key takeaway? Trust is not a guarantee of safety. It's an invitation to live with courage. When we trust, we're saying, I am willing to embrace uncertainty because I believe in something bigger: connection, growth, healing, and love. Trust doesn't mean everything will turn out exactly the way we hope, but it does mean that, no matter the outcome, we will be okay. One of the most important lessons about trust is that it's a balance, an art of discernment and boundaries. Trust doesn't mean ignoring red flags or giving endlessly until we're empty. It means knowing when to lean in and when to step back. It means offering grace to others while still protecting our peace. And when trust is broken, as it inevitably will be at times, remember this: broken trust doesn't have to break you. It can become an opportunity to pause, reflect, and grow stronger. Even when someone's actions disappoint you or life doesn't go as planned, your ability to trust again remains in your hands. Trust is not something that others give or take away. It's something you choose to nurture, rebuild, and carry forward. Perhaps the most profound form of trust is the trust we place in ourselves. When you trust yourself, your inner wisdom, your resilience, and your worth, you become less dependent on the actions or approval of others. You stop waiting for life to prove its fairness and instead find peace in your ability to adapt and thrive. Self-trust allows you to walk through life with both strength and softness, strong enough to set boundaries, soft enough to remain open to connection. So, if you've been struggling with trust, whether in others, in life, or in yourself, know that you are not alone. Trust is a journey, not a destination. It requires patience, reflection, and a willingness to start again. But with each step, you're building something profound, a life rooted in courage, authenticity, and peace. As you move forward, I invite you to carry these reflections with you. When someone shows you kindness, don't let past wounds convince you they have hidden intentions. Let yourself believe in goodness. When life feels unpredictable or unfair, remind yourself that even in uncertainty, beauty and growth are possible. And when you feel unsure of yourself, remember that you've survived storms you once thought would break you. You've already proven your strength. You can trust yourself to keep rising. Thank you for taking this time to reflect with me today. If this message resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with someone who might need a reminder that trust, while challenging, is also a profound source of connection and strength. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to Radiant Wisdom. Your support helps this space of reflection and growth continue to flourish. As you continue your journey, may you trust not only in others and in life, but also in the quiet power within yourself. Take care, and I look forward to walking with you again soon.